We'll take it from here. The National Communications Officer of the National Democratic Congress. He's a lawyer, policy analyst, none other than the man, Sammy Gyamfi. Good morning.
Good morning, Ben.
Thanks for joining the conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So you've listened to, and we're here for reactions, takeaways, what you see. I was smiling through my interaction with Andrew Ejapamesa. You were here, you heard what we said. But from the very bottom, what did you make of the State of the Nation address? And I'll appeal to you to do this. I know that you represent the NDC. Your party is in opposition. You are hoping to secure power and all of that. Take off your political lenses. Say it as it is. What did you get from the engagement yesterday? Because sometimes it's as though, oh, they're kind nah. What did you get?
Well, you know, the truth of the matter is that the president violated Article 67 of the 1992 Constitution, which enjoins him to deliver a message on the state of the nation to the Parliament of Ghana every year. And I say he violated that constitutional requirement or duty because the statement he presented had nothing to do with the state of our nation, as we all know. That statement he read was the state of an imaginary country, you know, in the head of the president. Clearly, this is a man who is living in his own bubble, a man living in his own wonderland, and who has completely lost touch with the realities of our country. First of all, it is beyond doubt that the state of our country today is one of bankruptcy, economic mess, economic hardships, high unemployment, corruption, waste, profligacy, and insensitivity, and so on and so forth. These words are what define the current state of our nation. Bankruptcy, hardships, insensitivity, corruption, profligacy, you know, and hopelessness. And so when the president mounted the podium and sought to create an impression that we're on the right path, I was wondering, what country is the president talking about? This can only be an imaginary Ghana. First of all, I want to start from the discussion on the economy, because everything, the economy is that foundation that every other thing.
And it's good you want to start from there. At least let me apprise people of what the president said. He said real GDP growth for the first 3 quarters of 2023 averaged 2.8%, higher than the targeted growth rate of 1.5% for 2023. They did 2.8% instead of 1.5%. That's a difference, a positive difference of 1.3%. He says inflation, which peaked at 55.1% in December 2022, had come down to a figure of 23.5% in January 2024, though there had been a slight uptick in recent times. He said the cedi had been largely stable since February 2023, with a cumulative depreciation of 9% between February and December 2023. You know that before that, it had been more. Then, gross international reserves, at least something to smile about, reflected a significant buildup at $5.9 billion, enough to cover 2.7 months of imports of goods and services.
Okay, so when you finish that,
that's all of that not make you excited?
I'm sure you're reading from the last paragraph of page 13 of his speech. And when he finished saying all these things, he concluded with a very instructive statement that generally the macroeconomic indicators are now in a good direction. You see, what should be the benchmark for the people of this country to assess the economic performance of this government? What should be the benchmark for the people of this country to assess the claim by the president that the economy is now headed in the right direction? And I contend that benchmark cannot be the mess this government created. That benchmark has to be the state of the economy that was handed over to President Akufo-Addo and Alhaji Bawumia on the 7th of January 2017. That is the economy they bastardized while they were in opposition. That is the economy that led them to say that the managers or the handlers of the economy then were incompetent. It was the economy that they said the fundamentals were weak. It was the economy that was the economy they promised to transform in 18 months. So if you want to tell us that the economy is headed in the right direction, and now things are going on well and all that, the benchmark for making that assessment, in my view, should be the state of the economy that was bequeathed to you. You cannot use your own mess as the benchmark. For example, you can't say that I was so reckless that in 2022 alone, the central bank printed over 45 billion Ghana cedis for me, leading to hyperinflation.
You know there are contentions with that.
No, there is no contention about they contend the 2021 figure. They don't contend 2022. The Bank of Ghana has issued a statement admitting that they printed 45 billion Ghana cedis, and Alhaji Bawumia has also admitted same and even applauded them for doing that. But that singular reckless act was what led to the hyperinflation of 54% we chalked in December of 2022, which according to the World Bank plunged over 800 Ghanaians into poverty. You know that, Ben. So you cannot turn around and say, I was so reckless that I supervised an escalation in the rate of inflation to 54%. So if the rate of inflation is now 23.5%, clap for me, I've done well. That cannot be the benchmark. The benchmark should be that when the economy was handed over to you, the time you were talking plenty, promising us heaven, promising us paradise, what was the rate of inflation? It was 15.4%.
But at that time, you were not grappling with COVID-19.
Oh, I would deal with those. I would deal with those.
Just hold. You were not grappling with the Russo-Ukrainian war. You were not grappling with IPP overhang, the debts that we had to pay.
We're grappling.
You have all of this adding on to your. You feel the joke,
we were grappling with a far worse crisis.
Which was what?
A significant drop in commodity prices on the international markets.
But that can't be an excuse on any level. Every country goes through that, depending on what it is that you export.
Hold on. If your major export earnings are gold, cocoa, and oil, and the prices of all these commodities on the international market plummets down, in the case of oil, to below $50 per barrel in 2015, these are exogenous shocks that will disrupt the foundation of your economy because it will significantly affect revenue mobilization. We had to deal with an energy sector crisis for 3 years. Do you know the impact of doomsor on the economy? A problem that we inherited. Because successive governments had failed to invest in energy generation and fuel and so on. So we had our own crisis. But hold on.
I get it though, but just on the bit about oil, sometimes we pretend around it. If the price of oil falls, it also means that while you are losing, you also benefit in a way. Mind you, we produce oil. So while you may sell at a lower cost, what your deficit is, you're also getting at a lower cost. It cuts across the same way when we're celebrating that oil prices or talking about oil prices have gone up and we're complaining.
What about cocoa?
We're complaining about cocoa? We were also benefiting from it.
What about cocoa?
Well, that one is a different situation.
Of course.
But I say oil.
So it's not just oil.
As an excuse.
It's not just oil. Well, oil is one of the main exports that gives us forex. Right. And so if your oil projections drops by more than half, it is going to affect your currency. It is going to affect your economy. It's going to impose hardships on your people. It's going to affect revenue for development. Even though at the downstream sector, the export price is likely to go down, you will be deprived of important revenue for critical development. Right. That is what happened to us. And it was not just that. It happened to cocoa. It happened to gold. And above all, we had to confront a power crisis that lasted for more than 3 years. A crisis that had nothing to do with the government of the day. It was an act of God that the West African gas pipeline got disrupted, affecting the flow of gas from Nigeria, to Ghana for the powering of our power plants and so on. It was by no fault of President Mahama, for example, that our generational capacity had been outstripped by demand because successive governments had not made any significant investments in that. We did not make excuses. President Mahama took responsibility, said he will fix it, and he fixed it. So that is what we are talking about here. The president insulted the sensibilities and the intelligence of the Ghanaian people when he said that the economy was in the right direction, headed in the right direction, because one, they told us in opposition that when in doubt, you look at the exchange rate. That the exchange rate is the most important economic barometer for assessing the strength of the economic fundamentals of every economy. Now today, we know that whereas one needed just about 4 Ghana cedis to get $1, today you need more than 13 Ghana cedis to get $1. And you look at our faces and tell us that things are getting better and things are headed in the right direction. Do you know the debilitating impact of this free fall of the national currency on businesses, what it's doing to the capital, investments, and profit margins of businesses? People are laying off workers because of the free fall of the cedi. If somebody needed $10,000 to import, say, 1 container of a particular good into this country, in 2016, the person needed just about 40,000 Ghana cedis, 400 million Ghana cedis. Today, you need 130,000 cedis, 1.3 billion Ghana cedis for the same container, for the same $10,000. That is what we are talking about.
Inflation has impacted different countries in different ways, like Ejapamesa was.
Let's stay on exchange rate. Let's stay on the exchange rate because that is what they say determine the strength of the fundamentals. Look, we are recording this free fall of the cedi, even at a time the government has defaulted on its external debt obligations. Ben, we are not servicing our external debt, which is denominated in dollars. What that means is that
but we are under an IMF program. We are not servicing.
Of course, but I'm saying that no, the fact that you are under an IMF program doesn't mean you will not service your external debt.
I am merely saying that we have timelines. We are starting some payments from within a certain period, and we have a certain leeway. We are breathing. We are getting to breathe. That's the point I'm making.
Because we are begging countries who have lent to us to give us debt relief, and that process is ongoing. But I'm saying that that respite should have translated into a better exchange rate, because the pressure on the cedi has reduced drastically as a result of the fact that government is no longer having to convert cedis into dollars to pay our external creditors.
But it did.
So if in spite of that...
Sammy Gyamfi, it did.
When?
The dollar was going for 16, if I'm not mistaken, at a point above 16.
You're still not getting my point.
It fell to 11.
It came to 12. Something. It is at 13. And I am saying, and this is, but don't forget that at the beginning of 2022, it was 6 cedis, right? And it went all the way to 16, 17 cedis because of the capital flight, because of the excessive borrowing and the reckless spending, which destroyed the fundamentals of the economy. Investors lost confidence in the economy and decided to move their monies out. Now I'm saying that that is what eventually led to the debt default. Today, the government is not converting cedis into dollars to service our external debt. That is what I'm talking about. And it's been so for more than 1 year. And so the dollar should be somewhere around 8 cedis or 7 cedis, not 13 cedis. What this means is that, but for the fact that we are no longer servicing our external debt, the dollar would have hit 20 Ghana cedis or more by now. That should show you the gravamen of the problem, the magnitude of the problem we are talking about. Put aside the national currency. I have already mentioned the rate of inflation. As I speak to you, food inflation for last month was 27.1%. Food inflation under the NDC government was not even up to 12%. Today, food inflation is 27.1%. Check our neighbors. Whether it is Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, even the countries that have been overtaken by military juntas, which of them have recorded food inflation of 27.1%?
You do know that per weighting systems, food and non-alcoholic products are given a certain weighting, and it may not necessarily be the same metrics that other countries use. That weighting
has always...
It's not always the same metrics that other countries use. I do get it. It is pretty stark. It is pretty high. Month-on-month inflation is going up. But I'm saying that don't generalize it in a way as though it were a single metric being used.
Food inflation is food inflation.
Do you accept that the metrics are not the same used across different countries? You know that?
Well, even in economics, there are 2 different ways that you can calculate inflation.
So but
the point is that no matter the method you use for calculating inflation, whether it is the CPI or the other methods, I don't want to get technical and go into those things, those methods are supposed to give you the actual food inflation.
Right.
You understand? So if food inflation is 27.1%, overall inflation is 23.5%, and it's currently on an upward trajectory, that is the most important thing. You can't say that the economy is headed in the right direction.
But over the last 2 years, it has fluctuated. It goes up sometimes, it comes down sometimes. It's not been.
Currently, we are talking about the current state, my brother. The current state. Somebody under President Mahama, inflation was 15.4%. You called him names. You insulted him. You said he was the incompetent one. You promised to strengthen the fundamentals and transform the economy in 18 months. Under you, food inflation is 27.1%, and you are telling us that it's been fluctuating. The fact that it's been fluctuating is even bad, because it means that there is no stability in the market which allows businesses to plan. Now look again at our public debt, my brother, which is our biggest problem today. After embarking on a draconian debt restructuring, because this government has so overborrowed that today we can no longer service our debts, and after imposing crude financial haircuts on government creditors, including citizens of this country, including pensioners, the IMF in 2024, in their Article 4, publication, says that our debt position is still distressing. In other words, the public debt position is still unsustainable. It has not improved.
Yes, but when you go to the credit rating agencies, you would see that we were not where we were before.
If you move from
you're fully aware of that as well.
We have moved from F to E.
Is it progress or not?
It is insignificant progress.
It is progress, right?
It is insignificant progress. It is progress that you can't do nothing with. If your child goes to school and he scores F in mathematics, and the next time he scores E, he can't come back and say, Daddy, I did well, I did better because I scored E. The bottom line is that
the child actually did better. Maybe not well, but better.
But what is the net impact of that better performance? It's still failure. That is the point we are talking about. We still can't service our debt. We have still been locked out of the international capital market.
But
unlike other neighbors of ours who can go there to borrow, we can't go there to borrow. Debt to GDP have gone up the roof, and so on. So you can't tell us that the public debt is getting better. Let's go to this GDP thing. You see, like you said, other countries that have been confronted with the problem of Russia-Ukraine war and COVID, and these countries are not far from us. You even mentioned Djibouti and the rest. What about Nigeria, Benin, and these countries? Look at their economic growth rates. They are all doing better. When they took office, the overall growth rate for this country was 3.6%. And the only reason why it was 3.6%, because the non-oil growth for 2016 was about 5%. But the reason why overall growth rate came to 3.6% was because the oil and gas sector in that year 2016 grew by negative 15%. Why negative 15%? Because by no fault of the NDC Mahama government, but as a result of a pure act of God, the turret bearing of FPS and Nkrumah got damaged. And so for the greater part of that year, we could not produce oil. So the growth for the oil sector was negative 15, which brought the overall growth to 3.6%. Come and see what these people did to us in this country. I'm sure you will recall. They insulted us and said 3.6 growth was the mark of incompetence. Today, it is not even growth for 2023, which is 2.8. It is the average growth for the first 3 quarters. Chances are that if you add the last quarter, it will go down.
Chances are that it may remain where it is or even do better.
My brother, you campaigned against the NDC Mahama government and said we should be voted out because under us the economy only grew by 3.6%. You want to be kept in power for growing the economy at 2.8.
Sammy, I have a question for you. Before COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukrainian war hit, at what rates was the economy growing?
We were growing in 2017 at 8%.
Right.
By 2018, we came to 6-point-something%.
We're growing at about 9%. We've hit just about 9%.
So what's the point?
The point is, if you're saying that now it has come down to 3%, they can point you to some things and say we're growing at X% before COVID hit, before Russia.
You know the growth rate for 2011 at Adamama?
I do know that it was pretty high. Around, is it 14?
Not pretty high.
Is it 14?
Not pretty high.
14.
It is the highest in the history of Ghana.
Around 14.
14.4%.
Right.
Highest in the history of Ghana. Why didn't they say, when growth dropped to 3.6, why didn't they say that, oh, John Mahama had done well before as head of the economic management team, achieving the highest growth rate ever in the history of Ghana, so he should be pardoned? Why didn't they say so?
They'll also point you to the fact that you were benefiting from the new wells, oil revenue, which from 2010 had started.
That is why I love you.
I mean,
that is why I love you.
They'll point to that.
That is why I admire you, because having a discussion with you allows us to deal with all these flawed arguments, because you bring them out, and I like the way you're doing it. Look, we got the highest growth rate because of oil, 14.4%. Okay, in 2010, when John Mahama was chair of the economic management team, there was no oil. We grew by over 8%. There was no oil. Well, that oil that they claim gave us the 14.4% growth was only one oil field, the Jubilee Fields. In 2017, as a result of the investments the NDC Mahama government had made in the oil sector, which had brought on stream 2 new additional oil fields, the 10 and Sankofa fields, the economy grew by only 8%. So we were able to grow at 14.4% with one oil field. And you get 2 additional oil fields, making the total oil fields we have 3, and you grow at 8%, and also a man Antonio Monfro. What kind of analysis is that? They forget to tell you that the economy grew by 8, not by their doing, because even before they took office in 2016, the Economic Intelligence Unit, the IMF, the World Bank, and the Finance Minister had all projected that the economy will grow by 8% in 2017 on the back of what? The 2 new additional oil fields that had been brought on stream by President Mahama. Right. What that means is that if Benjamin Akapo was the president and Sammy Gyamfi was his mate, the economy would have still grew by 8% and over, because the work had already been done. Again, it's instructive to point out that when they took office, we were under an IMF program. A program we signed onto. I
was waiting for you to get there.
Yes,
I knew you would.
We signed onto in 2015, which they bastardized and said it was totally unacceptable. They were going to bring us out. When they came, they realized that that program was well thought through, but we have come up with homegrown economic policies to transform the economy. So you know what they did? They extended the duration of that program from 3 years to 4 years. And that is why the program, instead of ending in April 2018, ended sometime in 2019. So all the so-called economic growth and positive economic matrices they chalked during that time was because of John Mahama's 2 additional oil fields, and number 2, the IMF program they came to meet with the extended. Immediately the IMF left, the recklessness began. And that is why, even before COVID hit in 2020, you recall, in 2019, that the cedi depreciated by over 14% against the dollar. So much so that the government had to set up a 40-member committee to investigate the reason for the depreciation of the cedi. Franklin Kujo and all, you recall, they were all part of this committee. The economy was in a mess before COVID struck. The fiscal deficit, which is the measure of the prudence or the fiscal discipline of the government, had already gone out of control by 2018, because per the figures that submitted to the IMF under the Rapid Credit Facility, the deficit was 7% in 2018 and 7.5% in 2019 before COVID struck, when the acceptable benchmark that they themselves have passed into law was 5%. What should that tell you? It should tell you that the reckless spending had already begun. And that is why the World Bank Country Director, Mr. Laporte, says Ghana's economy showed serious signs of challenges even before COVID struck. Our public debt...
I think that goes without saying. We're fully aware that the debt burden was getting to unsustainable points. But we can also same for you when at a point you moved from around, $10 billion, we shot up within a period of years to about 122 billion, which was what was bequeathed to the MPP, and they've also added about 480, 500 billion that have been added on. I knew you would contend that, but I'm only saying.
Not contending.
No. I'm only saying as well that if you look at the jump, about 10 billion to 122 billion, mind you, on the back of Kufuor's HIPIC and all of that, there was a point where our debt stock in real terms was around 750 million.
The most important thing, Kufuor had debt forgiveness. Kufuor had debt forgiveness under HIPIC.
I started on that.
The most important thing is whether we are able to service our debt or not. Do you know the debt stock of Japan? Do you know the debt stock of the United States of America? The most important thing is that they are able to service their debt. The most important thing is that your debt is sustainable based on your debt to GDP. With all that debt you are talking about, debt to GDP under Mahama 2016 was 56%. A lie?
It hovered over 60%.
No, 56%. I put my credibility on the line, double check. 56% debt to GDP for 2016. By 2022, debt to GDP was 104%. You know what that means?
Where is our debt to GDP now, if you want to make those
equations? Now you can't tell because of the debt structuring.
The last time I checked, it was hovering around 70%.
But the IMF is still worse than what they came to meet. And the IMF sees that it is still unsustainable and distressing. And we can't service our debts. Under President Mahama, in spite of the debt you were talking about, our economy was rated as B-. Today, our economy is still in the junk categories. President Mahama's economy had access to the international capital market because investors had confidence in us and were ready to lend to us on the Eurobond market. Today, same cannot be said about this government. There is no basis for comparison. My brother.
Okay, so let's wrap on the economy. Let's wrap on the economy because I want to address some other core areas.
Look at even the real sector, my brother. Manufacturing sector, critical to the development of every emerging economy like ours, grew by 4.3% in 2016. Do you know the growth for the manufacturing sector for 2023? Guess.
Tell me.
Negative 1.2%. Negative 1.0%. Industry. No, sorry. Industry grew by 4.3%. Currently, 2023, the growth is negative 1.2%. Then manufacturing grew by 7.9% under President Mahama. 7.9. And they call the names. They claim they are doing 1D, 1F. So you would have expected manufacturing to be booming. Growth for manufacturing is negative 1.0. Then construction. For a government that claims that they have built more roads than all governments in history, they've undertaken more infrastructural developments than all governments in history. Do you know that the construction sector has been going in the negatives for a very long time? It grew by 8.4% under the visionary nation builder, John Mahama. Today it's growing at negative 5%. So the economy is still in a state of comatose. The economy is still in tatters. This is a real sector. And the source of this, if you are watching me, is Appendix 1C of this government's own 2024 budget statement, which should be on page 167 of the budget. Just Google it and check it for yourself. So it is not true that the economy is headed in the right direction. In fact, it's an insult to the vast majority of Ghanaians who today cannot buy kinky. They can't buy yokogari. They can't buy even sachet water because
you were in this country
and people are suffering.
You were in this country when Dr. Bawumia touted, and rightly so, doctors are suffering, nurses are suffering, teachers are suffering. Were they not suffering? They may be suffering now, but were they not suffering then? Which is why your administration was booted out. But let me make the point.
The fact that somebody was suffering is not the issue.
Right.
The fact is that...
No, you're mentioning Kenke. You're mentioning Kenke, and I'm telling you that Kenke was expensive then too.
No problem.
For someone, it was pretty expensive.
The point is that the rate of the suffering are not the same.
Right.
So the fact that you were suffering 8 years ago doesn't mean that if you are suffering today, it is the same. Because... Right. The rate of inflation should tell you the speed at which prices are changing on average on the market. So if under President Mahama, it was 15.4%. And these people have taken us all the way to 54%, and now we're hovering around 23.5%. That should tell you that the level of the hardships are not even comparable. But under the economy, a related matter is the issue of unemployment. And in fact, that is what broke my heart. And that is why I say the statement the president read was not the state of Ghana's address. Look, what is the biggest problem confronting us today? Tell me. It's a joblessness. It's a high unemployment.
Which has been with us for a long time. Throughout the Fourth Republic.
What we are seeing today has never happened in the history of Ghana. Check the Ghana Living Standard Survey 7 conducted in 2016 and 2017. The unemployment rate was 8.4%.
Right. 8.4 versus the 14.3 there.
14.7. Almost double.
Averagely.
Almost double. Youth unemployment today is over 30%. The Ghana Statistical Service says that there are about 4.5 million people in Ghana who are even outside the labor force. These are people who, out of frustration, have even given up on the dream of searching for jobs.
As the population increases, you can expect some of those to happen,
Please,
right?
it's not true. That is why it's a rate. It's a rate. It's a percentage. So it's got nothing to do with the population. What is
as the population increases,
these
those
are
will
the
be
people who said they
qualified for the job market.
When you're not in the country, when Bawumia said under the MPP, the economy will grow and grow and grow, and there will be jobs and jobs and jobs. Where are the jobs? What has happened to NABCO? What has happened to you?
He says his administration has created 2.1 million jobs. Do you contest that?
The Minister for Employment, yes.
If you say it's a total lie, how do you contest?
Because the Minister for Employment in February, on the 18th of February 2021, said that the government had created over 3 million jobs. Right. When he appeared before the vetting committee.
Whatever the case may be,
it's still
2.1 million plus.
In September 2022, he said the government had created 5.3 million jobs. But Bawumia himself, in April last year, August last year, said that the government had created 2.2 million jobs. Now the figure is 2.1. Which one should we believe? If this government has created 2.1 million jobs, unemployment in this country should be negative. There should be overemployment. Because according to the Ghana Living Standards Survey 7, the total number of unemployed people in Ghana as of 2016 was 1,027,000. According to the 2021 population census, total unemployed people 1.5 million.
Right.
Even now, the figure is still about 1.6 million.
Recently, what we saw was 1.8 million.
1.8 million. If you have created 2.1 million, there should be overemployment in this country. These people are liars. The last time we told them to bring the breakdown of the jobs they have created, do you know the breakdown they brought? 700,000 jobs under Enobwa, planting for food and jobs. Where they said the fertilizer jobs. They said, we have given this quantity of fertilizer. And we know that for every 1 bag of fertilizer, it can work on this size of land. And for this size of land, it will require this number of laborers. So this number of laborers times the total bags of fertilizer, we have created 700 to 800,000 jobs under Enobwa, planting for food and jobs. These guys are just deceivers.
Let's move the conversation forward. Mr. President said, I'm glad to say so far so good. We have managed to keep the lights on these last 7 years. Even I told you I'd go back to that. Even in the midst of a financial crisis. Something you failed to do. You gave us doom so.
Very good host.
Then he also talks about free SHS. Yes, I'll lump a few things together. So free SHS and our no guarantor policy are breaking down financial barriers for students seeking higher education. He's spoken about the fact that there are many more of these students who never would have gone or been in any tertiary institution. They are there now on the back of free SHS.
So let's start with, we have kept the lights on. What did he do to keep the lights on? You see, God is not man. God is not to be mocked. You see, their time is up, their cup is full. So now as they try to lie to the people of this country, our God continues to expose them in real time. At the time the president was waxing lyrical about keeping the lights on, I was having light off in my area. You can ask anybody who lives there. And many parts of this country were in darkness. In fact, Tamale, Yendi, Ashanti region, they were all in darkness. Why? Because the reality is that doomsday is back. In the last couple of weeks, the ECG has been shedding 300 to 500 megawatts of power. Instead of them to have the decency and that respect for Ghanaians to enable us plan our lives by simply publishing a load shedding timetable, they say they won't do so. Because once they publish the timetable, NDC people will say doomsday is back. So today, what we are having is erratic power supply. You don't know when the power is going off so that you can even plan your life. If you like what I've done, open the lines. I'm just saying yesterday, check. In Accra here, in all parts of the country.
I don't think
it's everywhere.
Something to, because people sent in messages when he said the power was. But you also know, you also know about the circumstances right now. Sometimes it's not about not having money to pay for the gas, but the gas is simply not available. Can you blame the administration
for that? It's not about any gas not being available. We have the Tuabo.
How about the WAPCO situation?
Oh, my brother. The others that we know is the problem of debt. You took over a sound energy sector. John Mahama had brought in the power plants, Car Power, AXA, Ameri, and all that. We had generation capacity more than what we needed. And plans were far advanced with the help of the AFDB to export more power to our neighboring countries. Do you know that today we have stopped exporting power as a country? Number two, President Mahama had bequeathed to you a tax handle, EXLA, which was meant to clear the legacy debt in the power sector. And when Bawumia took office, he went to Washington in March 2017 and indicated that they were going to collateralize the EXLA for a bond, which was going to be enough to clear the legacy debt. Anybody watching it, you can Google it, 2.4 billion cedis. They collateralize it for a bond. This is after they promised to scrap it too. They increased it, collateralized it, extended the period from 5 years to 15 years. They took the money and squandered the money on something else. So the debt has been accumulating, and this is crippling debt, suffocating the SOEs. So today, Dumso is back because of the mismanagement of the power sector.
What would you call Dumso? Per their definition, sustained power outages for a protracted length of time and all of that. 3 years, 3 years, 3 years of that qualifies. Would you say Dumso fits the script?
Then number two, you mentioned free SHS. Something strange happened yesterday. For the first time, President Akufo-Addo read a speech. We don't have time for me to go through the speech. President Akufo-Addo said we should all be interested in improving the free SHS. Really? Oh, so the free SHS needs improvements. We didn't know, Mr. President. We thought you said everything was rosy and fine.
But some members of the MPP have admitted that it needed improvement.
But President Akufo-Addo said we're all political Jeremiahs and naysayers. He insulted all of us anytime we said, let's improve free SHS. And then he said, they've been investing in basic education. Under you are not ashamed of yourself. For over 5 years after the introduction of a new curriculum, you can't buy textbooks for our basic school children. And you are saying you are investing in education? Today, look at the secondary schools. Even Wege, almighty Wege, the PTA and the school prefects, children are sleeping on bare floors because there are no beds. There are no furniture.
And that never happened. And that never happened. That never happened under the NDC.
Tell me, did we have traffic light under NDC?
You didn't have problems.
Tell me.
With SHS.
When in the issue of Wege under John Mahama or Atamels did you see children lying on bare floors? It never happened. There is no basis for equalization. When these critical issues are raised,
issues at that level,
the unwholesome food being served our students, the traffic light system, which is
did you say unwholesome food?
Yes.
Did you just say unwholesome
Haven't
food?
you read the reports? Haven't you read the complaints from headmasters and PTAs?
Does that make the food unwholesome? If
Of course.
unwholesome, would
Haven't
they be
you seen
given
some of the
to
pictures?
the
Then I will send you some of the pictures.
I have seen these.
You should see the kind of soup.
But unwholesome is a strong word. Unwholesome basically means it's not fit. It's not fit for consumption.
Another adjective. Will you serve that drink to your daughter in the house? That's drink you call soup. Will you serve it to your daughter in the house? Then he says, but he made one statement, which that one.
Finally on that point.
Then I'll come to the final one. He said that he has been listening to the advice of Bawumia. He said it is only an unwise president who will pretend to know it all.
He did not say he had been listening to the advice of...
interpretation.
Fine, but
the man
say what he said.
It is only an unwise president
right,
who will not listen to the advice of his officials. Are you contending that Akufo-Addo is unwise?
I am not saying that he is unwise.
You can't even say that.
But he did not, by saying so, say
so the man says,
he had listened to all the advice of Dr. Bawumia. That's not the extension of it.
The Bible says, by your words you shall be justified. By your words thou shalt be condemned. The man says it is only an unwise president who will not listen to the advice of his officials. What is he telling you? He is telling you that this Alhaji Bawumia, who told me he was an economic wizard, my husband is an economic wizard. This Alhaji Bawumia, who Akufo-Addo told us at Ayawaso West Wagon, that he has all the wisdom in the world in his head. All the advice he gave him on the economy, he listened and he applied the advice. That is very instructive.
I think that is a wild stretch.
Run away from direct responsibility for the economic.
That is a wild stretch. You cannot say that because you take someone's advice, you take all their advice. No one does that.
So show me one advice
no one
gave that Akufo-Addo didn't take.
We do not know what he's given that has been taken and what he's given that has not been taken.
So you can't make.
And the man himself has come to say that I'm a mate. And that is not. I have an advisory role.
Do you know the role of that? Do you know the role of a mate?
Do you know the role? Do you know the role of the finance minister? He's not the finance minister.
Do you know the role of the mate? The role is the one who boards passengers. Choco, Accra. He's the one who boards them. When they get to the end point, he's the one who tells the driver to drop them. He's the one who collects the money. The driver doesn't even collect the money. He is the one who does all the accounts. He is the one who sees certain things behind the driver that the driver doesn't even see. So if you are a reckless mate, and you support a clueless and reckless driver, okay, to plunge us into a hole, you cannot turn around and say I was just a mate, because even as a mate, you have failed. That's the point.
The president said, unless you don't want to respond to these, the president said, he talks about the 10 trillion Ghana cedis that has been saved.
Ben, I'm expecting you.
Relax,
you have something you do. Relax. Your program, that editorial you do is called Blunt Thoughts.
Yes.
I'm expecting you to do one on this.
He makes mention of 10 trillion saved by the Attorney General in judgment debts. You've already spoken about the fact, what he said, that the buck stopped with him. And he also made mention of guaranteeing peaceful, credible elections, and that he would not allow any party, any individuals to destabilize the country. That was a good call, I believe.
Let's start from,
and I think it's a call that you support as the NDC.
Let's start from the so-called 10 trillion saving by the Attorney General. How did they come to that conclusion? What is the...
Ejapa mentioned that $500 million judgment debt
my good brother talked about.
That was spared us by the court's ruling.
This should be.
If you do the multiplication, that should give you a fair figure.
From MPP serial callers. I don't expect people at the level of...
Ejapa Mensah is not here to...
He's a lawyer, but how can he be...
To defend himself.
What I'm trying to tell you that statement is below the belt. It's below his level. Because he's a lawyer. You cannot take all civil actions that have been brought against the state. Add all the damages that were claimed in those actions. Put it together and say, I have saved the country this money. The fact that anybody can go to court and claim anything.
But if we are lost, we would have had to make those payments.
Why should we have lost?
What toll would that have taken on our economy? Just imagine it.
What is the basis for saying that if we are lost? What is the basis for saying that the state didn't have a good case?
But we could have lost.
Why? Why could we have lost?
The same way we lost the what do you call him? The water issue, Waterville.
Hold on. What is the basis for saying that we could have lost? In fact, what are the further and better particulars of those cases? So that we can examine each case on its merits and say that for this case, this was a very difficult case. The AG, through his ingenuity, put up a good fight.
And that's exactly what the president said.
If people take frivolous matters to court and they are thrown out in court, does that mean you have saved us money? What kind of logic is that?
But if the AG2 were not diligent, wouldn't we have lost? Wouldn't we have lost? You admit that, don't you? You admit that.
Under the NDC, do you know the cases we won?
I also know that you won some cases.
Even the litigation over our new oil fields that we had with Cote d'Ivoire. We won. Can you quantify that in monetary terms? Can you quantify that in monetary terms? What kind of analysis is that?
So maybe you can do your own analysis. He has done his analysis and he says we've saved 10 trillion. If you feel you've saved 20 trillion, you are free to say, talk about it.
He has just put out a figure without any basis. That is not analysis. Again, this government should be the last government to boast about judgment debt savings. Was it not this government who, through their reckless and unlawful termination of the GPGC power purchase agreement, has plunged this country into a judgment debt of $138 million, $20 million of which we have already paid?
Some will give you up to about $150 million.
Exactly. And according to the latest decision that came, the Attorney General was so sloppy that at the time, they did not even file a response for the people of this country to challenge that decision within time, even after they were given an extension.
Okay,
they failed to file their response.
So the judgment debt situation, I know your position. Peaceful, credible elections. He says he will guarantee that. You should be excited about that.
You don't guarantee peaceful election with mere words. You guarantee it with actions.
Has he acted in any way that suggests he will not guarantee that?
What didn't he say? You see, President Akufo-Addo, there is one thing he's good at. Let's give it to him. Flowery speeches, empty rhetorics, promises he doesn't intend to keep. So we are not fooled, and we will never be fooled by those so-called promises. Well, for whatever it's worth, it is good for the speeches. But the bottom line is that we want the EC to demonstrate in action that they are committed to a free and fair election. We are going into the election with our own referee in our pocket like Azuma Nelson. Vigilance.
Where your own referee is what?
Vigilance.
Vigilance.
That's your referee. Making sure that all the processes conform with our laws and that there is transparency, there is fairness. We don't care about what President Akufo-Addo has to say, because this is a man who supervised the murder, the state-sponsored murder of 8 innocent Ghanaians in one election.
You cannot say that.
Until date.
You cannot say that.
Who is the commander-in-chief
you
of
say
the Ghana Armed Forces?
state-sponsored. The fact that he is commander-in-chief of the armed forces, does that mean he's sanctioned the
Those
actions?
who murdered those young men.
Is that some, you're a lawyer. Is that vicarious liability or responsibility?
Those who murdered those young men in Techiman were military uniform wearing people.
So?
They were there sponsored by the state. The guns they fired at those innocent people.
So Ekufuado determined that they do that.
I said,
isn't there a chain of command?
State sponsored, not a state sponsored. But like he said, the buck stops with him. And so when any state agency engages in human rights violations, engages in the murder of its citizenry, the buck stops with him. He takes the ultimate responsibility because he's the chairman of the Security Council and the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces.
Well, at least
and my pain, which should be your pain, is that till date, he has neither commented on this unfortunate incident, he has not condemned it, he has not even visited the bereaved families, he has done nothing whatsoever to compensate them. And you want us to believe such a man?
Final words. And there's also this bit, if you have a few thoughts on them you can share. Ken Ofori-Atta as Special Envoy on International Finance and Private Sector Investments. You don't have more than a minute, so restrict
that is actually a promotion. And Ghanaians know that it shows that this government is not interested in cutting down the size of government, is obese size and making savings. Neither are they interested in sacking corrupt people. And I will want to end on this note, just give me 1 minute. Conspicuously missing in the address of President Ekufuado was the fight against corruption. A campaign he rode, on into office. Check his 2017 SONA, 2018 SONA. He spoke a lot about corruption. Why is the president dodging the subject of corruption? Why is he fleeing from this conversation on corruption? Why couldn't he say anything about the fight against corruption under his tenure in the last 8 years? The answer is simple. It is because his government has been defeated by corruption. His government has given up and lost the fight against corruption. Corruption has become a free-for-all, attractive and thriving venture under him.
Right.
Because he and his corrupt protege, Alhaji Bawumia, have engaged in and promoted corruption at a level never seen. And today, billions of Ghana cedis, which could have been invested in productive investments to improve our lives, to give us potable water, to provide dialysis machines at the Kolebu and Cat renal units, to save our children, to create jobs. All these billions of cedis are going into the pockets of a few selfish and individuals in this government.
You have to pause it there.
And a classical example of that, the locus classicus of that, is the 153 million cedis, 1.5 trillion cedis, which has been wasted on the Japa scam, and the $2 billion which we lost in the PDS scam owing to the orchestration of corrupt.
Well, until you're able to go to court and determine that it is a scam, you know the legal processes.
Also, before we went to court and determined that Attah should be convicted for armed robbery, he was not an armed robber. I am not saying. I'm saying that if you feel it's a scam, you know the processes to go through to determine that. So you can't come here and claim it's a scam. Court on a crime. Only the Attorney General and Minister of Justice.
So how are you going to deal with the Japa deal? How are you going to deal with it?
Well, let us take office. President Mahama has said that every person will be retrieved. There will be transparent, publicly televised investigations. And all the perpetrators will be prosecuted.
All right.
So give us power. And you will see how
the
likes of Bawumia and all these corrupt people in this government who are fleecing the office will be dealt with in accordance with law, no matter whose ox is God. And
one thing, though, that when we have the politicians come through, Sammy Gyamfi is speaking, and I agree with some of the points he's making, but sometimes the impression also is that
I know.
The impression also is that
you have said more.
The impression also is that for some reason the picture is created that maybe during your term all these things you are talking about
we're not a perfect make no mistake.
We're perfect.
Not a perfect
it wasn't the case.
And we don't.
But thank you, Sammy Gyamfi.
We are nowhere close to these nation records. What they have done to this country, not even the military juntas we have the Kotokes and the Free First and the Kufos and the champions didn't even dream of doing half of the damage.
This message comes through, and it's interesting. I'm reading just this one because it says, Ben, everything Ekufuado said, the opposite is true. And interestingly, the name of the person sending the message is Nanado. And that's the interesting bit there. It's live on Facebook. You can check it out. Well, this is the first end to that conversation. We've just hosted the National Democratic Congress's National Communications Officer, Sammy Gyamfi. Sammy, thanks for coming.
Thanks for
joining the conversation. But the conversation continues because we are taking the microphone out there to you. We're going to have engagements with you to find out what your thoughts are, what your reactions are to these sentiments shared by Mr. President in the State of the Nation address. We have to go now, Sammy.
Don't forget that our flag bearer will be informing the neck of our party and our Council of Elders
about the
election
running mate
tomorrow. That's another big news to look forward to.
Right. Well, it's still being contemplated. So I guess when you do have one, we can take it. Can you give us any sneak peek about what to expect?
I'm not the flag bearer.
Is it going to be male or female?
I can't tell.
Are you sure?
Only the flag.
Professor Jainan or Kokwajiman or someone else?
That lies in the bosom of the president.
But from where you sit, you would have seen something. At least you can tell us, male or female.
All I can tell you is that you'll be very excited about the choice of running mate.
Is it a new face? Is it a new face or an old face?
Let's wait till tomorrow.
Is it a new face? I mean,
I grow about
this is not. I've not asked you for a name. I said, is it a new face?
We are just 24 hours away.
Is it a new face?
We are just 24 hours away.
Is it someone we know?
Wait, you.
Is it someone who has served the party?
Of course, it will be someone who has served the party.
Over how long? 10 years?
The most important.
Sammy Gyamfi is National Communications Officer of the NDC. Stay with us. We'll be right back.